الحمد لله الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين وكفى بالله شهيدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده وإقرار به توحيدا وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وصلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're able to continue bi'idhnillah with the tremendous topic dealing with our actions, the importance of understanding our actions. And this is the second part to it, which is the intention, and niyyah is the backbone of every successful action. And what we mean by a successful action, we mean an action that is accepted and it's in conformity with the legislation of that of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which are the conditions for an action to be accepted. Because someone can do something, and just because they were able to carry it out doesn't mean that they were successful. And the end of shari, legislatively, they weren't successful. Okay. So it's important that we understand that a successful action consists of that which is done for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sake, and that which is according to the sunnah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. If anyone remember, we were on the hadith, the famous hadith, one of the most important hadith, which is the hadith of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And Umar ibn al-Khattab was Abu Hafs, and famously given the name or the nickname or the laqab, which was known as Amir al-Mu'mineen, the commander of the faithful. Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he mentioned this hadith on a minbar. And he said that he heard the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّةِ. But the importance of this hadith in the life of every Muslim is very muhim. That the ulama of the past, they have talked extensively, especially if you look into the works of Ibn Rajab al-Asqalani, not Ibn Hajar, Ibn Rajab. If you look into Ibn Rajab, his famous work, which is known as Jami' Ulum al-Hikam, he gives a scholastic analysis of this hadith, and he brings multiple statements from the companions and even from the tabi'een, and all the way down from the a'imma concerning an-niyyah, the intentions. And you will find that their statements were amazing and they were aligned with the actual ayat of the Book of Allah Azza wa Jalla as well as the Sunnah. Tayyib. So the ulama, when they discuss the issue of niyyah, okay, intentions, which is the Arabic word for niyyah, then when we talk about the scholar speech concerning it, then it falls under two meanings. Two meanings must be understood. The first of the meanings is that when the ulama looks at the word niyyah, or they look at the issue of niyyah, then they're talking about tamyizul ibadat ba'daha min ba'd. They are talking about the distinguishing the acts of worships from one another. Okay? Distinguishing the acts of worship from one another. So if an individual wanted to pray Dhuhr, or an individual wanted to pray Asr, then it's a must that he or she has an intention for each. You understand? So they have to distinguish. Because if a person was praying Dhuhr, all right, then their intention was to pray Asr, la yanfa, it doesn't benefit. The intention must fit what is actually for to distinguish it from that. So, for example, like distinguishing Salatul Dhuhr from Salatul Asr, or distinguishing fasting on the month of Ramadan from fasting outside of it, okay? Or distinguishing ibadat min al-adat, okay? So when they look at this, and this is many like the scholars of fiqh in their books, this is what they normally discuss when you talk about an-niyyah, distinguishing the act of ibadah from one another, and also distinguishing the act of ibadah from customary actions, okay? Such as a person making a ghusl, okay? Now, making a ghusl linguistically is to wash the body. However, there is a legislated ghusl, okay, as it comes in the ayat of Allah Azza wa Jal, and also as it comes from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ explaining how to properly do a ghusl. You understand? So an individual can make a ghusl, but make a ghusl linguistically, okay, just according to the Arabic language. It doesn't fulfill those legislated means or things within the ghusl to make it fall under the legislated type of ghusl. So a ghusl from janaba is different from a ghusl from tabarrud or tanzif. Okay, a person making just a regular habitual ghusl to just clean themselves. Okay, you come home from a day's work and you want to wash up, you feel better, wash up from all the debris, all of the work, the hustle and the bustle. If you had a real messy job or so forth, you worked in a factory or you was a carpenter or something like that, then you want to get that stuff off you. That's cleaning yourself for the purpose of making sure that you clean. But if you're making a ghusl from janaba, then it must be done a certain way, legislatively. Okay, it must be done a certain way. So you need an intention to distinguish between both of those ghusls. All right, the ghusl of cleaning yourself from work is not the same as the ghusl from janaba. And janaba, is when a person is in a state of impurity by having legal sexual relations with one's legal spouse. All right, tight. So he says, and other than that, or similar to that, وهذه النية هي التي توجد كثيرا في كلام فقهاء في كتبهم. This particular intentions is what which can be found often in the speech of the Islamic jurists, okay, in their books. The second meaning that the scholars talk about when they discuss the issue of an-niyya, that is the meaning of tamyizu maqsudu bil amal. All right, tamyizu maqsudi bil amal. This is when an individual is distinguishing the purpose or the objective for which he or she is doing the action in the first place. All right. Okay. For example, the action that I'm doing, is it done for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone? Okay. Or is it done for other than him? Whatever act that you do, any act that you do, you must examine that action. Because this is important. Why do we do what we do? Why do we post on Facebook? Why do we post on Instagram? Why do we say the things that we say? Why do we behave in the manner that we behave? When we do an action, what is we doing the action for? All right? Who are we doing the action for? Some individuals, they get dressed to impress the opposite sex. Some individuals say things so that they can catch the intention of the opposite sex. Some individuals do something so they can further their own ambition or further their own aspirations or whatever to fulfill whatever their desires. So when you're doing an act, no matter how lofty or noble that act is, you must make sure you examine that act with the intention. You understand? And this is why it's extremely important that every actions have an intention. Do you understand? Especially when it comes to acts of ibadat. All right, acts of worship. And when you're fasting, who are you fasting for? You're giving zakat, who are you giving zakat for? You're giving charity, who are you giving charity for? Do you want people to know that you're a generous individual? Do you want to be seen amongst men or people when you give charity? Do you want to lord over someone to the fact that you aided them in their time of need? Do you want to remind them constantly that you're the one who's given to them and that without you, they cannot move on? What is your intent? This is the point. You examine your actions. Why do you do the actions you do? This is an inward or internal projection here. And the scale that's going to help you understand that is the niyyah. All right. And this is what the scholars who normally deals with this. These are the scholars that deals with the issues of ikhlas, sincerity. Okay. In the qulub. Okay. The first meaning when the scholar speaks, that's the scholars of the fuqaha. That because they're concerning with the action itself, the mukallaf. And each of us are mukallifun. We are those who have been duty bound and responsible to carry out the obligations of Allah Azza wa Jalla and stay away from his prohibitions. So they worry about you distinguishing the niyyah, distinguishing that act of worship from another act or act of worship from a customary action. Okay, but the scholars who deal with the qalb, the qulub, ikhlas, sincerity, tawheed versus shirk, then these scholars, they are more concerned with Who did you do the action for? Okay? Ibn Kathir, rahmatullah ta'ala alayh, he mentioned three conditions when one has an intention that these three conditions should be fulfilled. And each of these three conditions really fall into the two types of meanings that the scholars speak about. All right? That making sure whatever action you do is done for the Allah Jalla wa Ala's sake. It's not easy. All right? Especially when we start to examine some of the statements of the scholars of the past, you will find statements such as Sufyan al-Thawri, he says, ما عالجت شيئا أشد علي من نيتي لأنها تتقلب علي. All right? So Sufyan al-Thawri, all right, rahmatullah ta'ala alayh, he mentioned that there is nothing, ما عالجت شيئا أشد علي من نيتي, there is nothing more difficult upon me. All right? Okay? That is more difficult or severe upon me than my own intentions. Okay? He said, why? Because my intentions change. They are subject to change. I can start and act off doing it for one reason and then end up within that is changing for another reason. Do you not understand? This is why it's very important that you examine yourself. Why did you do that? Why did you tell so-and-so that? What was the benefit of you saying that? Who did you do it for? So when it comes to acts of nobility, acts of worship, acts that brings about praise and commendation and so forth, then it's very important that you understand that you make sure that action fulfill both, make sure that action fulfill the second meaning, which is taqsudu tamyizu taqsudi or maqsudi bil amal, that you make sure that you distinguish that act that you are carrying out right now for Allah Jalla wa Ala face. It's for Him alone. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I did this for your sake. Allah Jalla wa Ala, I did this for your sake. And it doesn't matter if you pose to the people that you did it for His sake, because Allah knows. Allah Jalla wa Ala is the one who what? Huwa alimun bizat as-sudur, as Allah says in numerous ayahs in the Quran. He is the one who knows the heart. Bizat as-sudur. He is the all knowledgeable of that was in the breast. So Allah Jalla wa Ala know why you did the action in the first place. You can't lie to Him. All right, as we've seen in the hadith that we were going over. And it becomes clear why this issue is an important issue to understand. So with that being said, we can finish some of the speech that Sheikh Salih Fawzan Hafidhahullah was showing us an example in a beautiful hadith, one of the most hadith that frightens me, because any individual in the area of giving da'wah have to definitely check his intention, especially now with the Facebook platforms, the live, the YouTubes, and all other types of different streaming medias. We have to extremely be careful and examine our intentions of why we're doing what we're doing. All right, and it's not an easy thing. Okay, yeah, it's easy to to flap at your gums. That's easy, but for the action to be accepted, then it have to meet certain criteria, and this is what you're going to have to run on a daily basis. Why are you talking? Why are you sharing information? Why are you calling people to? Is you calling for yourself, or are you calling for Allah? What is the importance of it? So all of this stuff has to undergo the mind of a person who's a da'i. Sheikh Salih Fawzan Hafidhahullah, he brings a beautiful hadith, and we did the first part of the hadith about the three different types of individuals who will be brought forth on the Day of Judgment. One of them was brought forth, and he was the individual who fought and was killed. And jihad is a noble act, one of the highest acts in Islam. But however, his reason for doing the act of jihad, even though it was a noble act, Allah Jalla wa Ala traced it back to his niyyah, his intentions for doing the act in the first place. It wasn't so that he did it for Allah Jalla wa Ala. Say he did it so that people can see that he was brave, that people can see that he was courageous. You understand? He did it for that, all right? And he got what he wanted. So then the second individual that will be brought, all right, is وَرَجُلٌ تَعَلَّمَ الْعِلْمَ وَعَلَّمَهُ وَقَرَأَ قُرْآنًا فَأُوتِيَ بِهِ لِيُعَرِّفَهُ نِعْمَهُ فَعَرَفَهَا. The second individual is the individual who learns Islamic knowledge. Not Islamic knowledge, I only use that translation here. The individual who learns knowledge, okay? He learns knowledge and he teaches that knowledge that he or she learns, okay? وقرأ Quran, and he recites the Quran. فأوتي به ليعرفه نعمه فعرفها. So he will be brought forth. He will be made to be brought forth to recognize these favors. Okay, all right, and he will recognize them. Allah Jalla wa Ala will say, "Ma amilta fiha." Why did you do that? Why did you take your time out, sacrifice your time, exert yourself physically, exert yourself mentally, to learn knowledge? Why did you learn knowledge? Why did you go to that school? Why did you sit in that halaqah? Why did you listen to that dars? Why did you record? Why did you memorize? Why did you write? Why did you do, etc., etc.? Why do you do all of that for knowledge? And then you taught the knowledge that you have gained and you learned. And you recited Quran. Why did you do that? So he will be made to call all of these favors into recognition. And he's going to say, تَعَلَّمْتُ فِيكَ عِلْمًا وَعَلَّمْتُ. I learned all of this and I taught this only for your sake, Allah. وَقَرَأْتُ فِيكَ Quran, and I recited the Quran only for your sake. Allah Jalla wa Ala says, قَدْ كَذَّبْتَ. Allah Jalla wa Ala said, indeed you have lied. وَلَكِنِّكَ تَعَلَّمْتَ لِيُقَالَ هُوَ عَالِمٌ. However, you did all of that so that people can say that you were a knowledgeable or learned person or scholar. Wait, I'm in class. Right? So he says, فَقَالَ قِيلٌ, and it would be said about him. وَقَرَأْتَ قُرْآنَ لِيُقَالَ هُوَ قَارِئٌ. And a person will recite Quran, and it will be said about him. You recited, he says, you recited Quran, so it could be said about you that you are a qari, someone who is known to recite Quran. فَقَالَ قِيلٌ, and indeed it was said. ثُمَّ أُمِرَ بِهِ فَيُسْحَبُ عَلَى وَجْهِهِ حَتَّى أُلْقِيَ فِي النَّارِ. This part of the hadith, the whole hadith is frightening, but this part of the hadith is more frightening. So for me, because Allah Jalla gave me the ability to, love Quran, memorize the Quran, reciting Quran, etc., and even teaching and learning knowledge. So it's very makes you examine even more. So why are you doing what you're doing? Because you can't fool nobody. I might can fool the people on Facebook, might can fool the people on YouTube, might can fool the people in the masajids, so forth. But you can't fool Allah Azza wa Jalla. And that's what this hadith is showing you. So all of the actions that you did, even though the people looked at you one way, and even though the people have accepted this, and you've got acclimates, and people have, praised you for these things, on the day of judgment, that's when you're going to see whether or not your action was actually sincere for the sake of Allah or not. Did you really learn ilm so that you can get closer to Allah? You understand? This make you a better person. They used to say, I remember when we was young, they used to say, take 5 minutes to think before you do an action, right? Because in that 5-minute time that you take without moving hasty, it allows you to actually, review and to analyze certain things. When we make decisions, split decisions, more times than often, we end up causing more harm than benefit. But when we stop and examine and really give thought to what we're getting ready to do, all right, that changed the perspective. We would do things a little bit different. You understand? And this is why you don't supposed to move in the haste of anger, because anger clouds that judgment. That rationality that Allah Jalla wa'ala gave you, that aql becomes muffled and becomes covered in the state of ghadab, in the state of anger. All right? This is why the Prophet says you make wudu, because anger is your body, the blood is boiling, you're getting heated. All right? And some people get so angry that they actually black out. Do you understand? They actually just, the lights is cut off, and you understand, and they won't go. And it caused more harm than it would cause them to have benefited. So it's important that you keep that aql clean. And keeping your aql clean is that you don't subject it to things that cause it to not function in a proper manner. You understand? Such as humor. Okay? Such as humor. All types of humor. All right? That will cause you to lose the faculty of reason. The moment you lose the faculty of reason, you lose your advantage. And that's in any situation. If you're fighting someone who might be bigger than you, someone who might someone who might be physically stronger than you, you can win half of the fight mentally than you can win physically. But if you lost the faculty of reason in the middle of a fight, and you're not fighting with the mental part of you, just fighting here on brute strength, you're going to lose. And it's clear, you lost that advantage. But the advantage is going to be given to you when you have the faculty of reason. And this is why this hadith is so important for us to understand. You cannot act and behave as you want without examining why you did what you did in the first place. What are you doing it for? If you was to stop and ask yourself that all the times, I guarantee you have a better outcome, a better result if you was to examine yourself. And this goes for me as well. So the Shaykh says, وَهَذَا مِمَّا يُوجِبُ لِطَالِبِ الْعِلْمِ أَنْ يُخْلِصَ نِيَّتَهُ لِلَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ فِي طَلَبِ الْعِلْمِ. He says, so from this we can see that from this is what is required of the student of knowledge, that he makes his intention sincerely for Allah Azza wa Jalla when inquiring knowledge. فَلَا يَكُونُ قَصْدُهُ تَرَفُّعٌ. His intention should not be that he is elevated or raised in the eyes of the people. You understand that his status is lifted up. Oh, that's so-and-so, he's a talib. This is one of the reasons why I actually discussed that concept of people walking by, pointing fingers. So-and-so is a talib. So-and-so is a student. So-and-so is this. No. So-and-so is a abd. You understand? I spent my whole entire life as Allah Jalla wa Ala exposed me to Islam and to accept Islam to become an abd. All right? Which is higher to me for everything that I come across than just being a talib or ilm. Because an abd, in the true sense of the word, is someone who is fulfilling the objective of ubudiyyah, servitude. Do you understand? And we contend with that on a daily basis, given the fact that we have a limited free will, given the fact that we have desires that we can control and cannot control. Sometimes we win and sometimes we lose. All right, so those things being in the way don't allow us to be a full and complete servant like we need to be. Do you understand? So that's my job. Yeah, call me Abdullah. I want to be worthy of being called Abdullah. More so being worthy to be called an talib or ilm. You understand? A student of knowledge. And then people parade that around because that's what happened. Many people parade around, yeah, he's a talib or ilm. He can't do no wrong. Or so-and-so, why are you discussing with him like that? He's a student of knowledge. Has he stopped studying knowledge? I mean, has he reached a level that he no longer required to seek ilm? Labadan. No one. I don't care if you reach the manzil of being a scholar. You never reach the level where you can say, you know what? I'm done with my talaba. I don't have to seek knowledge no more. That's not heard of. You're going to seek knowledge until you meet Allah Azza wa Jalla. Period. So he's ever in the state of a talib or ilm. Do you understand? So if that's the case, then just running around saying, you know, that's a talib or ilm as if he reached the station. He didn't reach the station yet. And if he reached the station of being an alim, in his eyes, he's a lesser to the people, then more so the people uphold him. This is why you find statements of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud when the people will follow him. The companion Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, when they will follow him, and they will say things, what would he say to me? He says, may Allah Jalla wa Ala make me better than what you think of me. And may Allah Jalla wa Ala forgive me for that. Huh? Forgive me for that which I fall short, which you do not know of. Because he is analyzing the fact that he understands himself. He understands his own shortcomings, his own deficiencies, etc., etc. And that's what knowledge does. Knowledge takes the mirror and put it like here, right on you, like a microscope. And instead of you taking the mirror and placing it on someone else, because that's what people do, and that's what Sheikh Bakr Abu Zayd, he mentioned in his famous book, which is called Hilatul Talib al-Ilm. Sheikh Uthaymeen got a beautiful explanation to it. I have it here in the library. But in there, it's called The Etiquette of Seeking Knowledge. It has, may Allah reward those brothers who have rendered it into the English language. It definitely was some difficult, as Sheikh Uthaymeen says about the speech the scholar used. He was a scholar, and he was real strong in the Arabic language. Anyway, he brings a beautiful point in there. He brings the stages of talib al-ilm. And he said that there are three main stages which each student undergoes. And one of them, the very first stage, which is interesting enough, the very first stage that the student has to pass and must master and overcome it is the stage of kibr, of arrogance. Because the moment you begin to know something, the moment you want to what? You want to lord it over the person who doesn't know. The moment you start to smell yourself, you start to feel yourself because you think you know and that person doesn't know. So you beat individuals with it. Yes, you got to overcome that stage of arrogance. All right? Before you didn't know what Aleph Ba Ta was. Now that you know Aleph Ba Ta, you can read. That doesn't mean now that you beat up the person who doesn't know. Before you knew how to offer salat, you didn't know. So now that you know, you want to beat up the people who don't know. These type of things is the first stage that you go through. You must really try to master these things and say, you know what, I'm gonna try to focus. But what knowledge does, if you approach it with the pure niyyah, which we're talking about, why you're seeking it in the first place. If it's done for Allah's sake, you ain't gonna do nothing but do this. Take that glass and it's going to stare that mirror, and it's going to stare right down on you. So now you're going to be highlighting every action you do. Did I do that correct? Did I fall short in that? Was this for other than Allah? Was this for Allah? Who am I to talk? I got to seek istighfar. I got to do X, Y, and Z. And then when you realize that you don't got time to look at Fulan, Alan, so-and-so. So you're not in the gossip column. You're not putting up the posters talking about every person that's out there. You're not talking about the mistakes and the flaws of so-and-so and so-and-so. If you're going to put up a post, it's going to be very reflective because you're going to be eternalizing your own problems. And this is what the reality of what ilm is supposed to do. As they say that the more you know, the less you know. All right? The more you know, the less you know. And this is what it does. And this is when a person approaches it on a sincere way. So the Sheikh, he says, وَوَظِيفَةُ الدُّنْيَوِيَّةِ وَتَحْصِيلُ حُطَامِ بِالْعِلْمِيَّ وَتَعْلِيمِ. Meaning that a person uses the knowledge only to ascertain some worldly benefits, to reach a level of employment, for example. Okay, I acquired this certificate, I got my degree, so you have to listen to me now. So now I can raise up my, I can raise up my money, what I'm going to get. So now I'm worth 100 grand a year, 60 grand, 80 grand a year. I can actually move up on that financial ladder because of the information I have. In Islam, that's very, very tricky. It's not impermissible to work or ascertain a certificate or shahada. It's not impermissible to do so. And it's not impermissible to work and in the service of it. But it's important that you don't make that the ghaya, the goal, that you only sort knowledge so that you can. And that's how, if anyone studied the Western approach to education, that's what education is based off on: employment, financial. That's what it's really based on. We go back and do a real search on it. You're going to find this. Inshallah, this ain't something I'm making up. This is actually true. I did a talk on this a while back, reading from an article explaining the goal that they and the objective that they have. So anyway, that's what this was about. But in Islam, it's not like that. You can't seek knowledge for some other sake. The first aspiration of seeking any form of knowledge is to be done for the sake of Allah, period. All right? And then secondly, it must be done in according to the way that the Prophet ﷺ actually has legislated or laid it down. So the Sheikh, he says here, وَإِنَّمَا يَكُونُ قَصْدُهُ لِلَّهِ, say that I just said, that his intention should only be for Allah Azza wa Jalla. لأن تعلم علم وتعليمه من أجل أعمال الصالحات فلا يصرفه ويريد به الدنيا. He says because when a person learns, not because learning knowledge and teaching it is from the most noblest, the most loftiest of righteous actions. فلا يصرفه. So he doesn't turn it to any other way than Allah Azza wa Jalla. يريد به الدنيا. And he doesn't turn it away and then thereby with it seeks out the dunya. وَإِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ بِهِ وَجْهَ اللَّهِ. He only thereby seeks out Allah Jalla wa Ala face. He intends Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَا يُعْطَى لَهُ مِنْ مَالٍ إِنْ أُعْطِيَ فَهُوَ تَابِعٌ وَلَيْسَ مَقْصُودًا. So whatever he is given, due to whatever station that he has reached in knowledge, then alhamdulillah, that comes along with the station, but that's not his maqsood. His goal is not that. If you don't give me so-and-so, I'm not going to teach so-and-so. That's not what it is. And if you look at the ayahs in the Quran, Allah Jalla wa Ala talks about the prophets and the messenger. And one of the things that Allah tells Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and even at the many prophets, they said that we do not do this seeking a wage, a reward. All right. Indeed, in the my ajri is only illa Allah. It's only upon Allah. I get the reward from Allah Jalla wa Ala for doing this, not for anything else. Okay. I just want people to really understand it. So the Shaykh said the third person that is brought in this hadith. Interestingly enough, all of these are noble acts. So it makes it examines our actions. The third person is the individual who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have endowed him or gifted him or favored him rather with having abundance of wealth. Okay. And so he takes that wealth and he spends it for good. And outwardly to the people, he seems to be an individual who spends much in the way of good. He's generous. Okay, he says, spending in the way of Allah Azza wa Jalla, no doubt this is the best one, the most virtuous of actions. So he says, a man whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have given ample amount of wealth. All right. He will be brought and made to recognize the favors that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala conferred upon him, so he will recognize it. So Allah will say, why did you do this action? He would say, ما تركت من سبيل تحب أن ينفق فيها إلا أنفقت فيها لك. He would say that there was no path, there was no area, no arena in which money or which sadaqah or anything was to be given or dispersed, except that I gave it for your sake. This is what he would say. Allah Jalla wa ala would say, كذبت, indeed you have lied. ولكنك فعلت ذلك ليقال هو جواد. Allah Jalla said, no, rather you only done that so that the people can say that you were generous. فقد قيل, and indeed it was said. ثم أمر به, but then he will be dragged. So we see the outcome of all of these individuals is what? They will all be dragged on the hellfire. But the most important thing that should scare us is that all of these different acts are noble acts. So again, you're not pulling a fast one over Allah Azza wa Jalla. It goes back to why you do the action. Check your niyyat. Check your niyyat. All right? Check your niyyat. It says, فَإِذَا كَانَ هَذِهِ أَعْمَالٌ جَلِيلَةٌ تَذْهَبُ حَدٌّ وتضييع على صاحبها يوم القيامة نظرا لنيات أصحابها وسوء قصدهم فغيرها من أعمال من باب أولى. فهذا من يؤكد على مسلم أن يخلص لنيته لله عز وجل. And this confirms that. Because if you look outwardly, all of these actions were noble. But in reality, Allah Jalla wa ala is examining the intentions of the individual. If it was a corrupted or ill intent, Allah would know it. And if it was a pure intent, then Allah Jalla wa ala would know it. But because the outcome and the consequences of what they had, the consequence which they received shows that Allah Jalla wa ala knew that they didn't do those acts for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's face. All right. So he says this is from those things which should emphasize upon the Muslim that he should make his intention sincerely for Allah. Whenever he establishes an act from the righteous actions. Well, he says, like salat, prayer, fasting, hajj, umrah, charity, seeking knowledge, teaching it, commanding the good, forbidding the evil, calling on the way to Allah, and other than that. So he should be observing. He should be a one who observes his intention. He takes his intention and he examines that bad boy. Okay, why is I'm doing this? All right. And it's funny, right? Because as I'm taking this psychology course and I'm examining some of the different approaches that the Western approach psychology, is funny because they're trying to study the process of the human mind. Okay. And by them trying to delve deep into the human mind and to answer or to predict behavior or predict a way a person think in order to help. I'm not saying that they don't have a lofty intention to do so, but the point that I'm getting to realizing is that Islam have covered so many areas to show us how not only complex is the mind and how complex is the human being himself because of the different components that makes up a human being, but there are certain things that keep us on that straight and narrow. You understand? And we're just talking about one of them. You want your actions to be accepted. You want your action to be successful. Then you need to examine why you did the action. Why is you doing what you're doing in the first place? You need to understand that. You understand? So when you examine that as regards to behavioralism, because behavioralism, especially which was argued by Skinner, is that behaviors, they break things down to 3 times. I'm not going to go too deep into that. But one of the things that he was arguing was that his study of animals, like cats and so forth, that they can be trained or reconditioned, is his argument about reinforcement and punishment. All right. And we do have in Islam, we do have reward and we do have consequences. But not everything is, because he argued against the concept that we have innate knowledge, that their knowledge can be actually inborn or ingrained in us about certain things. And many people, they actually differ with him in that, alhamdulillah, because it's already, he really can't prove that it isn't no innate knowledge that you have. Allah Jalla wa ala told us that we have a fitra, which is innate. You can't really deny that out. All right. You can't explain that away. So we do have it. But he just wanted to approach it really more scientifically than abstract. That's basically what he was trying to do. So anyway, intentions, even though that is not something that is tangible, so it would be abstract, really, you still need the intention to explain why you did what you done. And which shows that a human being doesn't act just yani, without any purpose whatsoever. That's not how the human being is made up. So you're not going to just come out and just start doing things unless certain things are removed from you, which you cannot explain. And that is the ulama, they look into that, what we call a person being majnoon. Okay, a level of a person, a level being majnoon, depending on how deep and affected he is from sane, and the faculty of reason is not there. Do you understand? This is why the Prophet ﷺ said in a tremendous hadith, he said the pen is lifted from how many? 3. And which one of it he says? And look what he says. He said the pen is lifted, rufi al-qalama and thalatha, is lifted from 3. And he mentioned the majnoon hatta yafiq. Okay? The one who insanity has left him. The faculty of reason is gone. So he can't explain why he does what he does. He don't possess that ability. So until that return back to him, if Allah Jalla wa'ala wills, and that reason return back to him, that's when he's going to be taking account for when he have his faculty of reasons to explain why he does what he does. And this is extremely important for us to understand. You have to know why you're doing what you're doing. And if you don't take the time out to ask yourself that, you're going to miss a lot. So that's why when you approach these hadith, man, these hadith ain't nothing. They're not like, oh, some sacred texts. They are sacred, but they're not some sacred texts that can't be touched or, I just memorized them. I really don't know how to use them in my day-to-day life. No, these hadith are used in your day-to-day life. That's why the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, was so successful, because before him, there were many scholars were gathering 40 or so many ahadith, but they were gathering them on sole topics. So if it was talking about jihad, they would carry 40 hadith on the issue of jihad. But what he was able to do was to diversify it. He brought 42 ahadith, touching on all of some of the different areas of Islam. You understand? And he was being so successful in that endeavor, alhamdulillah. But each of those ahadiths are extremely important. They're extremely important because they help you shape your life, your day-to-day life. You can't do an action unless you have an intention. And you can't do an act of ibadah unless you have an intention behind it. You must distinguish behind it. So you see how important this hadith is. Okay? And we're going to stop it here before going into the next part of the hadith, which is the next part of the hadith, which is for man kana hijratuhu lillahi wa rasulih, whoever made, because the Prophet ﷺ give us an example of what he was talking about of the 2 sentences. The actions are judged by intention. Each person gives that what he and she intended. So the Prophet ﷺ give us an example in hijrah. Whoever made migration for the sake of Allah and His Messenger, then his migration for the sake of Allah and His Messenger. Whoever made migration for worldly benefit, like business or commerce, or to marry a woman, then his migration for that which he migrated for. This was an example the Prophet ﷺ was giving us for the 2 statements that he already said in the beginning, so that we can understand the issue of what's the name. So Sheikh Fawzan finished here. He says also that you want to drive or repel away from yourself the issue of riyah. Okay, because we are all humans. Man is a human. We are exposed to wanting to be praised for what we do. Many people, when they post things, as they have many psychologists have studied, even with the social media area or Facebook or Instagram or different things, why do we post what we post? And we were looking at it from a psychological aspect. When you place your post on Facebook or Instagram, are you looking for validation? All right? Such as the picture taking. What are you looking for? What are you looking to accomplish? I'm not here to point fingers and say this is what we're doing it for, this is what we're not doing it for. But examine yourself. Why are you doing it for? If you put up a post and you get no likes whatsoever on the post, does that affect you or does not affect you? They do case studies on this stuff. You understand? They're doing case studies on this stuff to see how psychologically social media has affected us and the way that we, the way that we move about to afford. They have done case studies on this stuff. So if we examine why we do what we do, we are already in the stage, all right, without needing a string. Okay, I'm not saying you can't use a string. I don't want to misconstrue that. All right, but I'll get into that later in the mental health course. But without saying you don't need any of these things, but in reality, Allah has made you an individual who is accountable. So if you are accountable, you have to use those tools that brings about accountability. And in Islam, there are plenty. Do you understand? There are hadiths that shows when the actions are exposed to Allah Jalla wa'ala. Okay? Mondays and Thursdays are one of them. When the actions is raised up and then the action, to Allah Azza wa Jalla, the word is sent down, it's said. There's a hadith showing that annually, yearly, the actions of certain things are exposed to Allah. There are many hadiths that talks about accountability, of taking accountability of your actions. And one of those things here is the niyyah, the intentions. Why did you do what you do? And if you become accountable, it can alleviate a lot of stuff in your life. But when you don't want to become accountable, you can fall into being a person who is a habitual liar, a person who blames others. You understand? And you don't take accountability and become worse. And you damage every relationship you in, whether it's a romantic relationship or otherwise. Because, you bring about mistrust. Nobody want to trust an individual who doesn't take themselves to account. Who wants to do that? Oh, you never wrong? Nobody likes a person who's always right. You're never wrong. And if you don't take the time to examine why you was doing what you did in the first place, you can get a lot done, inshallah ta'ala. So hopefully, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're finishing this. Whatever we said that was incorrect, definitely. In our translation that they was from ourselves and the shaitan, what we said was correct from Allah Jalla wa'ala. And hopefully we can finish these two hadiths specifically. The hadith that deals with the inward actions, as we're talking about in the hadith of Aisha, the hadith that deals with the outward actions. Inshallah. Subhanakallahumma bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Jazakallahu khairan for everyone tuning in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.